The Hyundai R215 is a big name in the construction equipment world, but a lot of people only half understand it. Some can't even tell you for sure how heavy the thing actually is. So I want to walk through it from start to finish, where it came from, what it is good at, where its weak spots are, and how it changed from one generation to the next over the years. Let's start with the name, because Hyundai's logic for naming its excavators is actually pretty simple. That R out front stands for rotary hydraulic excavator, and the number after it roughly corresponds to the machine's operating weight. So R215 means a mid-size excavator, weighing somewhere around 21.5 tons. In the world of construction machinery, the 20-ton class has always been called the golden tonnage, because it is neither too big nor too small. It has enough muscle to move dirt. It is still easy enough to load up and haul around. And the fuel use and maintenance costs are both things you can live with. Putting up buildings, paving roads, municipal work, water projects, tearing buildings down. It can handle all of it. That is why nearly every excavator manufacturer pours its biggest bets into this tonnage. And Hyundai was no exception. There is one thing here that tends to trip people up though, and I want to clear it up early across different countries and different eras. Hyundai gave machines of this same tonnage a whole pile of names. The R215, the R210, and the R220 were often sold side by side. And in some countries, the R215 was never sold at all. What they got was the R210 or the R220. So if you actually go dig through a parts catalog, you'll find that the R215 and the R210 share a huge number of components. They're basically one family. Put another way, the R215 isn't some lone machine standing by itself. It is the representative of Hyundai's whole 22-ton clan. When we talk about the R215 today, we're really talking about that entire family. Keep that in mind, and a lot of what follows will fall into place. Now, let me say something about the company itself and how this machine came to be. Hyundai Heavy Industries was founded in 1972. And at the start, what it was famous for wasn't excavators at all. It was shipbuilding. Back then, Korea broke into the world market on the strength of its shipbuilding. And Hyundai was one of the leaders in that wave. It was only later, as Korean industry as a whole moved forward, that the company gradually worked its way into construction machinery. Before that, the excavator market inside Korea was largely held by European, American, and Japanese brands Caterpillar, Komatsu, Hitachi. Kobelco, those names had a near lock on the good part of the market. If Hyundai wanted to squeeze in, it had to do its own research and development and build its own hydraulic excavators. By the 1990s, Hyundai's R-series hydraulic excavators were out. The company read the situation well. They saw that the 21-ton class could take on the vast majority of jobs. So they decided to groom the R215 into their flagship product for the global market. From then on, the R215 step by step became one of the most central models in Hyundai's excavator lineup. Now let me go through, in order, how this machine changed from generation to generation. This is the part most worth telling. The earliest R215s were mainly sold into the Asian market. The machines of that era were defined by simple structure, toughness, and easy repair. The hydraulic system was already mature. There wasn't much in the way of electronics, and it wasn't fussy about fuel quality. That might sound like it wasn't advanced enough, but it was exactly this. Not picky, easy to keep character that made it go over so well in developing countries. A lot of construction crews later found that even out under a blazing sun, in clouds of dust, on a job site with poor maintenance conditions, this machine would still work long hours without getting temperamental. That earned Hyundai its first wave of good word of mouth. After the turn of the century, Hyundai brought out the R215 generation, and this was a watershed. From this generation on, the machine clearly moved toward being more modern. The gauges went digital, the hydraulic system was improved, the cab was more comfortable to sit in, and the engine got thriftier. The R215 quickly became one of Hyundai's best-selling mid-size excavators. After that came an upgraded version called the R215C, What the C version mainly did was make the hydraulic control steadier, the fuel figures better, the seat more comfortable, and the electronic monitoring a bit more complete. These two machines have remarkable staying power. Even today, if you take a stroll through the used machine market, you'll still see plenty of R215S and 7Cs busy on job sites, with no sign at all of retiring. Around 2010, the R215 generation arrived. The biggest change in this generation was on the electronic control side, where the whole system got a full upgrade. It could adjust the engine's output automatically based on the work you were doing. For instance, automatic idle, when you stopped working, it would bring the engine speed down on its own, or the fuel saving and heavy load modes. Light work, and it economized heavy work. And it let the power out for a construction company whose machines run non-stop year-round. The fuel saved alone adds up to a pretty considerable sum over a year. This generation basically handed the job of doing the math over to the machine itself. Later on, as the emerging markets took off fast, Hyundai rolled out the Smart Plus series. The representative models are the R215 Smart Plus, the R215 Smart X Plus, and the long undercarriage R215 Smart Plus. The thinking behind this series wasn't to chase flashy high-tech. It was the opposite, to bite down hard on a few things. Reliable, easy to fix, cheap to maintain, able to stand up to brutal working conditions. The result was that it sold extremely well in places like Southeast Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. That really says something about Hyundai's shrewdness. The company knows exactly where its main battlefield is, and it knows what the customers in those markets actually care about. Now that we've covered where it came from, let's talk about what this machine is actually good at. Starting with its hot. The engines the R215 has used over the years are mainly Cummins, Mitsubishi, and once Hyundai builds itself, with different markets getting different setups. But these engines all share one good trait: plenty of torque, durable, parts you can buy just about anywhere, and not expensive to repair. That one point matters enormously to customers in developing countries. No matter how good a machine is, if it breaks down and you can't get the part or find someone to fix it, it is just a pile of scrap iron. Hyundai thought this one through clearly. Next, the hydraulic system, which is an Excavator's true bread and butter. The R215 uses a very mature setup: twin variable displacement, piston pumps, load sensing control, and pilot operation. In plain language, that means when you are doing several movements at once, it coordinates them smoothly without fighting itself. The digging force is there too, and a new operator picks it up fast. A lot of veteran operators have an interesting take on it. They say the way the R215 handles sits somewhere between a Komatsu and a Hitachi. Responsive but not so touchy that it gives you a scare. It is the kind of reassuring middle ground. On the comfort side, Hyundai has always paid a fair amount of attention. The R215 generally came with a suspension seat, air conditioning, and a cab with decent sound insulation and a wide field of view. These things don't stand out day to day, but think about it. An operator has to sit in that little space for a dozen some hours a day. A slightly softer seat, slightly less noise, slightly clearer sightlines. And by the end of the day, the person just isn't as worn out, so naturally the work gets done more steadily. There is also the matter of maintenance, and when Hyundai designed this machine, it genuinely thought about how the repair guy feels. The engine compartment cover opens up nice and wide. The filters are easy to change. The hydraulic oil is simple to check. And the wiring is laid out clearly too. So plenty of repair mechanics will tell you that Hyundai, as a brand, falls into the easier to fix category. Don't underestimate this point. A machine gets repaired countless times over its life. And whether it is easy to fix or not bears directly on how much money it can make for you. If you string all these strengths together, it really comes down to a few words. The first is cheap, compared with same tonnage products, like the Caterpillar 320, the Komatsu PC200, and the Kobelco SK210. The R215's price is usually lower, so once you buy it, it pays itself back quickly. The second is plentiful parts, because the number of these machines out there worldwide is so huge. Whether it is pistons, cylinder liners, and injectors on the engine, or pump cores, valve plates, and seals on the hydraulics, they're all easy to find. The third is that it holds its value reasonably well secondhand. It is not as solid as a Caterpillar or a Komatsu, but demand for it in the used market has stayed steady, and the export business in Africa, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East is especially hot. The fourth is that it is quick to learn. The operating logic is simple, the movements are well coordinated, and the failure rate is low. So the training period for new operators is short, and the boss can rest easy. Of course, there is no such thing as a perfect machine, and the R215 has its handful of old ailments too. That has to be said, honestly. The most common is hydraulic pump wear. After the machine has run a long time, you may get sluggish movement, a loss of power, and rising oil temperature. The causes usually don't escape a few things: dirty hydraulic oil, long-term overloaded work, and maintenance that hasn't kept up. At bottom, a lot of so-called faults have their roots in the person, not the machine. The second is the swing reduction gear leaking oil. Some older machines that are up in years tend to develop this. The oil seal ages, the gears wear, and slowly it starts to seep oil. The third is wiring aging, which is more obvious on machines over 10 years old. The gauges jump around. Sensors throw alarms. Connectors oxidize and make poor contact. These are all the small nuisance kind of problem. Annoying, sure, but mostly not fatal. The fourth is the engine running hot, which can be caused by a clogged radiator, a worn fan belt, or a water pump losing efficiency, and it is especially common in regions that are hot year-round. The last is wear in the travel system. On machines that work long stretches in mines, the track links will wear, the drive sprocket teeth will wear, and the carrier rollers will wear. But this counts as normal consumption. No excavator gets out of it. The same way a car has to have its tires changed, if you look these few items over carefully. You'll notice they basically all come down to how hard the machine is used and the maintenance habits around it. They aren't design flaws unique to this machine, and that, in turn, actually shows that its foundation is sound. So where does it stand against the big names? In the global market, the R215's longtime rivals are the Komatsu PC200, the Caterpillar 3-0, the Kobelco SK210, the Hitachi ZX210, and the Volvo EC210. That whole bunch, to be fair, Caterpillar carries a higher brand value. Komatsu has broader market recognition, Hitachi has beautiful hydraulic performance, and Volvo has standout fuel economy. Each has its own trump card, and the R215's real skill isn't being top of the heap in any single one of those. It is that it strikes the balance point between price and performance, especially well. Precisely is the key to why it succeeded. Let me lighten things up and tell a few stories about the R215. They do a nice job of showing the standing it has in the field. In some parts of the Middle East, just how big is the R215's presence? Some construction firms simply call every 21-ton excavator, no matter the brand, an R215. The machine parked over there is plainly some other make, and the workers still open their mouths and say R215. It is the same as how some places call every photocopier Xerox, or call every instant noodle by one particular brand name. A single model's name turns into the label for the entire category. Think about how much influence it takes to pull that off. In the Southeast Asian used machine market, the R215 has a nickname: the easiest Korean excavator to flip. A lot of these machines get spoken for by a buyer before the ship has even docked, with no need to go through any formal sales process at all. That level of demand is the kind of thing voted in with people's feet, the real and solid way. In Africa, there are R215s that have already run continuously for more than 20,000 hours. To put that in perspective, it means this machine has had its engine and hydraulic system through one round of major overhaul and can still go back to work. It is exactly these machines, worn until they shine and still out there working, That earned the R215, the words built to last. Speaking of people, a few connected to the R215 are worth mentioning too, even though none of them ever personally drew up this machine's blueprints. One is Chung Ju-young, the founder of the Hyundai Group. A landmark figure in Korea's industrialization, he never designed the R215, but the root of Hyundai heavy industries is the one he planted. Another is Chung Mong-jun, one of the important people who pushed Hyundai heavy industries forward, and who put real effort into driving Hyundai's construction machinery out onto the international market. But if you ask me, the R215's true heroes aren't these entrepreneurs standing in the spotlight. They're the great crowd of nameless engineers behind it all. Year after year, they were the ones reworking the hydraulic system, tuning the engine match, refining the cab, and polishing the control logic. And that is what let this machine keep changing along with the market, evolving from that earliest simple, rugged version all the way to today's smart series that does its own fuel economy math. The legend of a machine is usually something put together by people you never see. Let me close by talking about just why the R215 has been able to sell so well for so many years. If you run back through its history from the beginning, you'll find that the R215 is not the most technically advanced excavator, not the most powerful, and not the lowest priced. Pull out any single category and it isn't number one. Its real distinction is balance. Between performance and cost, it strikes a good compromise. Between reliability and affordability, a good compromise. Between advanced technology and ease of repair, a good compromise. Between work efficiency and purchase budget, a good compromise too. And that is exactly what hits the real need of the great majority of construction bosses. At the end of the day, most people aren't after the most expensive, most impressive piece of equipment. What they want is a machine that can earn them money steadily, on and on. A machine you can afford to buy, that holds up in use, that you can afford to fix when it breaks, and that you can still sell off when you are done with it. That is worth more than any spec sheet. The R215 thought this through, and it pulled it off. So you see, from the earliest R215 to the R217 and the R215 on up to today's Smart Plus, what Hyundai has spent more than 20 years refining is really one and the same classic platform. For many operators, it is the first mid-size excavator they ever laid hands on. For many bosses, it is a flat-out money-making tool. And that is why the Hyundai R215 stopped being just a string of model codes long ago. It is a living slice of construction machinery history, stretched across a great many countries and regions.